What is up, everyone? My name is Matt.
And my name's Kyle.
And thank you so much for tuning into our first video here at DPRG. And with today being the official kickoff of our channel, we thought what better way to launch a new channel than with a top 10 counting down the best launch titles ever.
We all know that good launch titles can make or break a system, and it's no coincidence that some of the games on this list are some of the most memorable of all time.
Now, we only had one rule with this list. The game had to be available day one of the launch, so no near launch titles, just actual day one releases. Every single system that's ever come out is in play. And with that, let's get started. Alright, coming in at number 10, we have Doom for the Sega 32X. Now, the 32X version of this game is not even close to being the best version. In fact, it's significantly worse than the Super Nintendo version that came out earlier. But it's Doom, for crying out loud. This is the game that practically created the first-person shooter genre. How could we not include it? This game was like the grandfather of all the amazing FPS games we have on the market now. And while it may seem a little bit primitive today, its great gameplay, badass soundtrack, and unbelievable atmosphere make it an absolute classic. That being said, while we did include it on this list, it would have been significantly higher if it wasn't for the fact that the only time it was ever included as a launch title was on the 32X, and that version was inferior to every other version of this game that's ever come out.
Coming in at number 9 is Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube. Luigi's Mansion is a quirky little game that was a huge departure from what people thought a Luigi spin-off might look like. Gone is all the platforming we grew to love so much in the Mario series, and in its place is Luigi sucking up ghosts through a vacuum. You know what? It's actually pretty fun. The game is somewhat short, and it can be beaten in one sitting if you know what you're doing, but its addicting gameplay made it one of the more memorable titles on the GameCube.
Alright, next up at number 8 we have POWERSTONE on the Sega Dreamcast. So what Super Smash Bros. Is to the Nintendo 64, POWERSTONE was to the Sega Dreamcast. There are two types of fighting games in this world, tournament fighters like Street Fighter and party fighters like Smash Bros. And POWERSTONE is without a doubt one of the top party fighting games ever made. With its unbelievable controls, 4-player capabilities, and incredible cast of characters, POWERSTONE is one of the top fighting games of all time and one of the best games ever released on the Dreamcast.
At number 7, we're sticking with the old Dreamcast with Sonic Adventure. Quick disclaimer, this game is not aged terribly well, but for its time, oh my word was it amazing. Sonic's rival Mario had already made his jump to 3D, and Sega fanboys were anxious to see what their blue hedgehog's foray into the third dimension would be like. Well, it did not disappoint. Even now, seeing Sonic run down that bridge while the whale jumps all around brings back so many memories. This is still one of my favorite platformers ever, and in my opinion, the best game on the Dreamcast, period.
Coming in at number 6, we have arguably the single greatest 2D platformer ever made, and that is Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. Even though it seems like every single game on the Super Nintendo had the word Super thrown into the title in one way or another, Super Mario World is one of the few that truly deserves that honor. This game took everything the NES Mario games did and gave it the old Spinal Tap treatment by turning it up to 11. Those who know me know I'm huge into retro games, and this was the game that absolutely made me want to get a Super Nintendo for the first time. And once I played it, I never looked back, and I kept going in retro gaming, and my life was changed forever.
At number 5, we have the game that helped revolutionize the FPS genre and bring it to the next generation, Halo for the original Xbox. Featuring everyone's favorite green-clad, uber-generic Space Marine, Halo is the game that made everyone stop and say, you know, maybe these Microsoft guys just might make it in the video game industry. This is the game that truly started the process of streamlining online console gaming. Legend has it that the game got so popular that people set up servers to simulate LAN parties so they could play the game with people all over the world. Shortly thereafter, Microsoft changed gaming forever with the release of Xbox Live. You can thank Master Chief for that one.
Coming in at number 4 on the list, we have quite possibly the finest Zelda game ever created, and that is Twilight Princess on the Wii. While many people were skeptical of the Wii's motion controls, one thing is for sure, and that's that every fan of The Legend of Zelda started salivating the moment this game was announced. Literally salivating. The dungeons, the environment, the gameplay, everything about this game was just so beautifully crafted. And while Ocarina of Time is still my favorite game in the series, I have always appreciated the more mature feel that Twilight Princess brought, especially after the somewhat childish and cartoony feel of Wind Waker.
You knew this game was going to be on here somewhere. The only question was, where? At number 3, we have Super Mario 64. This game set the standard for how 3D games should be made. At this point, fully 3D games were relatively new, and Mario 64 was the first one to truly do it right. Everything about this game is amazing, from the awesome level design to the fluid controls to the just right level of challenge. What's amazing about this game is that even now, 20 years later, it still holds up and is just as enjoyable as it was the first time you plugged in your Nintendo 64.
At number 2, we have the greatest game ever made about falling blocks, Tetris. Now, the mark of a good launch title is whether or not it moves units. Simple as that. And boy does Tetris fit that bill. This game sold over 35 million copies worldwide. To put that into a little bit of perspective, when you add up the combined sales of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green, which is the Japanese only version, and combine that with the sales from the Virtual Console versions released last year, that's only 32 million copies. So Tetris sold 3 million more copies than the Pokemon games put together. Thousands upon thousands of people bought Game Boys just for this game. And one of the biggest things it did was it introduced adults to gaming with addicting puzzle gameplay. Simply put, it's the most addicting game ever made. And the sheer sales numbers alone are enough to warrant the number 2 spot on our list. Alright, before we get to number 1, here are a couple quick honorable mentions. For our first honorable mention, we have Altered Beast on the Sega Genesis. Now, this isn't the greatest game in the world, and there's quite a few flaws with it. But this game proved once and for all that arcade quality games could absolutely be on home consoles. I know it looks like crap now, but back then you gotta keep in mind that the Genesis had only one competitor, and that was the NES. And while some of the games on the NES might be better than Genesis games, when comparing the graphics of the two, there was no comparison. And it showed gamers everywhere that the Genesis really does what Nintendo don't.
For our second honorable mention, we have The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now I know you're sitting there asking, "But Kyle, the game hasn't come out yet. How can you say it's so great?" Trust me, I got to play it at PAX South for a little bit. This game is absolutely incredible. Since it's not actually out yet, we can't put it in the top 10, but I do honestly believe it's going to be up there, so we're going to put it as an honorable mention. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, our number 1 best launch title of all time. Here it is. The original Super Mario Brothers. But wait, I thought you guys said Mario 64 and Mario World were your favorite Mario games. Well, yes, they are, but the original Super Mario Brothers is the greatest launch title ever for one simple reason. It literally saved the gaming industry. How many games can you say that about? After the great video game crash of 1983, stores wouldn't even stock video games. The market had been so flooded with utter crap that people just stayed away from games entirely. Then along came everyone's favorite plumber to save the day. This game is arguably the most innovative video game in history. It put new words in our vocabulary like side-scroller and platformer, and while today this game isn't much more than an adorable little blast from the past, without it, the gaming industry may never have fully recovered. So that's our list, but don't just take our word for it. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment below with some of your favorite launch titles, or just straight up tell us our list sucks. It's up to you.
We're open to suggestions too, so if there's a list you want to see done, be sure to tell us in a comment, and be sure to subscribe for awesome new videos every single weekday.